Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening. I hope you're making today your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injuries, or medical conditions. I hope you're having a great Thursday afternoon. We are having, finally our temperature's warmed up, and warm is relative for us, or cold is relative for us here in Charleston, South Carolina, because it doesn't get in the teens or single digits like it does in a lot of the country, but it is in the 50s, nice sunny afternoon. Really excited to be here. Have a lot of good stuff to get to today, some male versus female things, exercise, something about sleep and a weird thing that some people do during sleep, and we're going to talk about a potential cure for loneliness. So a lot of good stuff today. As always, nothing I talk about in this show or the podcast version, obviously, none of this, the studies I give you, any of this is medical advice. I'm giving you all this for educational and informational purposes only. If you have specific medical questions or medical concerns, please talk to your doctor. Same thing goes as if you have any bone or joint questions and you put them in the comments here. If I do have time to respond to that as well will not be medical advice, just giving you information you can take to your doctor. If you want to come to see me in Charleston or Charlotte, North Carolina, please do. Go to my website. There's a contact form. Fill that out, and I can get that to my assistant, and she can help you set up an appointment. But very excited to be here. At the end of the show, I'm going to talk about a potential sort of format change I'm thinking about making to this show, or at least trying it out. So sort of keep an eye out for that in the very near future. All right, first thing I want to talk about, I actually did a TV video for the two TV stations I do medical segments for as their medical expert. I did I talked about this today, and it's this idea about, does it matter if you're undergoing surgery? Does it matter if the surgeon is the same gender as you? Meaning, if you're a female, is it good to have a female surgeon versus a male surgeon? If you're a male patient, does it matter if you have a male surgeon or female surgeon? Well, according to a new study in JAMA Surgery, and that's one of the sub-journals of the Journal of the American Medical Association, and I think this was at the University of Toronto, I think is where they did the study. They looked at, it was a population-based study over a long period of time, and that's exactly what they looked at. They looked at, is there a difference if basically the patient and the surgeon were a different gender? And what they found is, if they were not the same, if it was male patient, female surgeon, or female patient, male surgeon, 7% higher risk of complications within 30 days, readmission to the hospital, or death. Here's where this gets interesting. When you break it down by male patient and female surgeon, there was really no difference compared to male patient, male surgeon. Where there was a difference is if it was a female patient and a male surgeon. 15% higher risk of those issues, complication within 30 days, readmission, or death. Stunning, right? I mean, that's hard to believe, because let's be fair, the vast majority of surgeons out there in almost all of the surgical fields are male, especially in orthopedic surgery. It's probably 19-1, if not higher than that. Even a field that's a little bit more balanced, like general surgery, is still predominantly male. So if you're a female patient, that would be alarming to me. Now, the question is why? Well, before I tell you about what the theories are with surgery, generally, if this shocks you, this has been shown in other aspects of medicine, like primary care medicine, treatment of heart attacks, treatments of cancers. And some of the things that have been shown with this discordance, male doctor, female patient, worse rapport between the doctor and the patient, more uncertainty about the diagnosis, less likely to realize that the conditions and the symptoms are more severe compared to when it's a male patient. Concerns about a hidden agenda, and even, does a female take advice for a male? All of those have been shown to be a little bit different. Again, female patient, male doctor. Now, in the surgical setting, what potentially could it be? And this is where, what's interesting, before I tell you what it could be, it was not the quality of the surgeries. The surgeries were done equally well. And it was not a matter of the male patients having less complicated surgeries than the females. All that sort of balanced out. What they seem to think it was is that the male surgeons didn't appreciate the females having trouble after surgery or before surgery, not realizing the symptoms were as severe. Now, is that communication? It could be any number of things. So what I talked about on TV is, I don't care if you're a man or you're a woman going into surgery, make sure you fully explain your symptoms. Make sure you explain all your problems. After surgery, if you're having trouble, call the office, come in, get checked, make sure you get looked into. And if you don't feel the doctor is taking you seriously for some reason, talk to somebody on his staff and potentially go to another doctor. That's always tricky after surgery because a lot of times doctors don't want to take on postoperative care of somebody that had surgery with somebody else. But having said that, you've got to make sure your symptoms, your severity are recognized. Those numbers are stunning to me. I know 15% or 1 out of 7, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But when we're talking about getting readmitted to the hospital, when we're talking about a wound infection, when we're talking about persistent bleeding, when we're talking about chronic pain after the surgery, or yes, death, any of that, really worrisome. I would love to see this replicated or other data sets looked at to see if this relationship holds up. So I think there's a lot more we need to know about it. All right. Along the same lines, let's talk male versus female as it pertains to car accidents. Now, in my residency, orthopedic surgery residency, I had to spend, it was a total of 15 months. It's 6 months as a second year resident and then 3 months, your third, fourth, and fifth year residency. Noof, how are you? Good to have you here. And that was at a trauma hospital. It was actually the second busiest trauma hospital in the country at that time, behind only, at that time, it was, what I can't think of which I think it's USC's in LA. Los Angeles is a big trauma center. But anyway, so you spent 15 months there, and a whole lot of what you treated were victims of motor vehicle accidents and femur fractures and tibia fractures and pelvic fractures and just all sorts of just horrendous injuries. Well, there is a new, I will say, this was in the Washington Post. This is not news story. This is in their opinion section, and in the headline it says opinion. But I will tell you that this is a really interesting topic, and I don't know for sure if this is true. It's interesting at least. So more than 40,000 people die in car accidents every year. Now, supposedly, males are more likely the cause of the car accidents, but unfortunately, women are more likely to die in them. They're 17% more likely to die. They are 73% more likely to experience a serious injury. That's according to a University of Virginia study a couple of years ago. And here is the writer's theory behind it. Apparently, the vast majority of car makers in this country use male crash test dummies in their safety evaluations. And the government essentially doesn't require female crash test dummies. There are female crash test dummies. They're usually just smaller males, but they've actually, the technology, according to her, has come a long way with crash test dummies. Now they've got better sensors in their abdomen and their pelvis to check for injuries there, more sensors in the face, so that you could better position safety measures to protect those areas in women. The thought is that if all you use is a smaller crash test dummy, maybe the airbags aren't in right places, or maybe there's a lot of things that you might change, height of the steering wheel and things like that. And I didn't realize this, the National Highway Transport Safety Administration, when they do vehicle safety ratings on a car, they're only requiring the auto manufacturers to test them with male crash test dummies. So if a car or a truck gets a 5-star rating, that's based on a 5'9" 170 pound male crash test dummy, not a 5 foot or 5'2" 110 pound female. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration could do this. They could absolutely say you've got to test it with both. According to this writer, it would only cost us about $1 more for every new vehicle. But in theory, the car manufacturers could make their cars safer. Now, one, I need to see more data, and I'm sure that data exists about male versus female injuries in car crashes. There's studies done on that in the trauma world all the time. So I believe all that what she's saying. But is it the crash test dummies that are the problem? That's what I don't know. If that's a simple fix, to me that seems to be a no-brainer. I'd be curious what the car manufacturers would do in terms of, like I said, airbags and anything else to make it safer. Because yeah, we absolutely do. Now the question would be, are there other variables? Is it something about, bone density, or just any number of potential other factors that could be involved? But definitely an interesting thing. All right. Noof says the third wave in Qatar is getting worse for the coronavirus. Are we on our third or fourth wave? I've sort of lost count. I guess the Alpha variant, Delta, would be 1 and 2, but I thought there were 2 with the Alpha. So I was thinking we were on wave 4. We're going to have these sort of ebbs and flows for a long time, I'm afraid, but I hate to hear that. All right. Speaking of women, one of the common problems that some women have, it's not a huge percentage, but it's still a sizable percentage of the female population has, is PMS, or premenstrual syndrome. And some of the symptoms: anxiety, irritability, abdominal bloating, headaches, depression, breast tenderness. And it can be really debilitating for a large number of people. Well, there's a study that just came out out of the Barcelona Institute for Global Health and University of Bergen, looking at women, over 1,000 women in Norway and Sweden. And what they found is that people who lived in neighborhoods with more green space, much lower incidence of PMS symptoms than those that lived in neighborhoods that didn't have much green space. This was published in Environmental International. Now you think, all right, well, why would that be? The two things when I saw this study, immediately I thought, well, one, they probably have lower air pollution. Neighborhoods with more trees and all aren't going to have big cities or factories and things like that. It's got to be air pollution. Or you got more green space, you're more likely to go out to the park and do exercise or run or something like that. Turns out those factors didn't play a role. This idea of living somewhere and being somewhere with green space didn't seem to have anything to do with exercise or air pollution. It seemed to have something to do with cortisol levels and stress. It appeared that the women in the study that lived in areas with green spaces had lower cortisol levels. What those lower cortisol levels do, cortisol is thought to be involved in the release of progesterone, one of the sex hormones that is thought to play a big role in PMS. So if you have the ability to live in a neighborhood with trees and that kind of thing, definitely do that. If you don't, my recommendation would be somehow get outside every day, try to get to a park and exercise, walk, play with your dog, play with your kids outside, something like that, if that's a problem. Very, very interesting study. We've talked a lot on this show about the benefits of nature. It's good for kids, it's good for our overall health, it's good for our fitness levels because people that live near nature tend to exercise more. Lots of positives to it. This is one that might be a little surprising. All right, I know people, and I won't call them out here because these videos live on forever, that do lots of weird things in their sleep, like scream or talk real loud or swing their arms like they're punching somebody, and I've never thought anything about it. Well, there's a new study that suggests that if you know somebody that does that, they might have a really worrisome sleep condition. It's called REM, sleep behavior disorder. And REM sleep is the phase of sleep when your brain's still really active, but obviously you're not physically moving most of the time. That's when you have your really vivid, really intense dreams. But a very small percentage of the population has this RBD or REM sleep behavior disorder. Punching in your dream, kicking in your dream, screaming really loud in your dream. I don't know much about it. I had never heard of that disorder till I saw this study. But here is where it gets interesting. It does seem to be linked to the development of Parkinson's disease. There was a study that looked at RBD patients over 7 years. By the end of 3 years, 30% of them had Parkinson's or some other neurodegenerative disease. By 7 years, by the end of the study, 2/3 of them ended up having Parkinson's or neurodegenerative disease. Now, if you get tested positive, you go to a sleep lab and a sleep doctor and they diagnose you with RBD, what do? Well, first they do things to keep you and your partner, whether it's your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, keep you and him or her safe. Padding around the bed, anything like that, padding on the floor, maybe if you're going to roll off on the floor. But then there are medications. Clonazepam or Klonopin, an anti-anxiety drug, is something else that sometimes people can do. But that's kind of scary, right? So you think somebody's just a funny sleeper, no big deal. Maybe not so much. They may have an actual condition. It typically occurs, again, it's very rare, typically occurs in people in their 50s. But if you have a husband or wife or partner that does that, maybe you go at least talk to your primary care doctor. But I'll tell you, I had never heard of this. So maybe you go get a sleep study and see a sleep physician. All right, speaking of sleep, this is something I care a lot about. I don't remember how long ago this was, 2016, I think. Arianna Huffington of the Huffington Post fame. Her first book is a book I love and highly recommend called Thrive. Her second book, and maybe she had books before that, but Thrive was fantastic. Her second book was a book, I think it was called The Sleep Revolution. It was basically about how we need to get more sleep. And I'm actually quoted in that book on a section about sleep and athletic performance. And I called sleep, I can't remember my exact quote, I'll find it and read it on an upcoming show. But basically saying, hey, you need to sleep. It's just as important as nutrition and training and everything else. There's a new study looking at lack of sleep and specifically running performance. It was in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. And it was really interesting. They took a bunch of endurance runners and had them do 4 different time trials. I don't remember how far they had to run, but they did it this way. On 4 days, 4 time trials. Before the first one, you just slept however you slept, and that was sort of your baseline. On one of the nights after that, you slept 2.5 hours less. One of the nights you slept 2.5 hours more. And then the fourth one, you just, again, stayed at your normal sleep. And here's what they found. They found that people the runners that got the less sleep had the slowest times. That may or may not surprise you. But also, they felt like they were working harder. Basically, they were slower, worse performance, but they felt like they were working harder. They felt that it was harder exercise. On the other hand, the runners that slept longer, faster times, and they felt like they were working less. So the authors of this study conclude, hey, all right, especially for people that run a lot and are looking to increase their training, hey, if you're about to boost your training, make sure you correct your sleep deprivation first. Get, plenty of sleep, get back up to baseline. And again, usually for most people, that's 7.5 hours of sleep a night. Then increase your sleep. And it makes sense in the sense that lack of sleep lowers muscle recovery from prior workouts, making you, in theory, a little bit more likely to get hurt. I did a TV segment this week on people recovering from COVID are more likely to suffer running injuries as they get back to running after suffering COVID than people who didn't get COVID. And one of the thoughts are they were basically sedentary, not exercising for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and their muscles got weak and their bone, just basically all around, their aerobic conditioning got a little bit weaker, and then they pushed themselves really hard to make up for that lost time, and they got more injured. It was 30% of runners suffered an injury after COVID, whereas people that didn't get COVID, it was 21%. It was 1.66 times more likely to suffer an injury if you've had COVID than if you hadn't. So if you are trying to get back to running or any kind of exercise after you've had COVID, go back to it slowly, but make sure you get plenty of sleep. All right, how many people remember The Biggest Loser, that TV show? I watched it. I was dating somebody. God, how long ago was that? 10, 12 years ago. And she was obsessed with that show, and she was in good shape. She just thought it was fascinating to watch these people lose that much weight, and she loved Jillian Michaels. And so I'd watch it. You remember Jillian Michaels? It was hosted by the girl that was on Days of Our Lives, Sammy Brady. Allison Sweeney, and then there was a male trainer, Bob something or other, I think. And these people were 300, 400 pounds, and they would lose 100 pounds, 150 pounds, sometimes 200 pounds. It was really amazing. Well, there was a study done. Basically, that show caught the attention of somebody that works at the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, and he wondered if they put their weight back on, and if so, why that is. Because here's the problem. When you go from a ton of weight to a very low weight, your body is not going to burn many calories. We all have a resting metabolic rate, basically what the calories it takes to do our normal activities. And people that are frequent exercisers, tend to have lower resting metabolic rates. The thought is, if you go back to the days of the hunter-gatherers, having to do a lot of physical activity, your body naturally sort of slows its resting rate down because they don't know when the food's coming. So these people on The Biggest Loser, in theory, are going to work out. Eventually, now that they drop 200, 300 pounds, they're going to have a very low resting metabolic rate. So he studied, I can't remember, it was 14 people, 6 years after they were on The Biggest Loser. Sure enough, they had regained weight. But he looked at how much weight they had regained and how much they exercised and what their base resting metabolic rates were, and it was really interesting. Their resting metabolic rates were still really low, even though now they were eating a lot more. They sort of lost their nutritional habits, started eating more. With that low resting metabolic rate, of course, you put on weight. But here's what was interesting. The ones with the lowest resting metabolic rate were the ones that were exercising the most still. So 6 years later, a whole bunch of them were still exercising a lot. They had the lowest metabolic rates. Now, what makes this tricky and to try to figure out, is exercise keeping your resting metabolic rate low, is that the ones that exercised were also the least likely, or were the ones that put back on the least weight. Now, there's a lot of variables here, right? So the ones that were exercising a lot may have also been better about not cheating as much on their diets, and it could have been any number of things. But this relationship between exercise and what your resting metabolic rate is tricky. I've said all along, and there's plenty of science to back this up, if you're trying to lose weight and you had to pick between exercise and fixing your diet, always go with fixing your diet. That's going to have a much bigger impact on your ability to lose weight. There is no question about that. Not that exercise isn't good, but that doesn't typically move the needle. Where exercise is healthy is people that typically exercise every day are more likely to eat a healthy diet. It's sort of a keystone habit in the Charles Duhigg type of thing. Your one habit that leads to other healthy habits. So big on exercise, but you got to fix the nutrition first. But there's a lot more we're going to have to figure out. And the author of this study says this is still a hypothesis. But is there something about dropping a lot of weight and still exercising that keeps your resting metabolic rate low and making it hard to keep weight off? Who the heck knows? And then last, let's talk a little bit about loneliness. 3 out of 5 Americans in 2019, pre-pandemic, 3 out of 5 Americans said they felt lonely. That's stunning to me. And I wonder, I've got to believe that's higher, at least it was in 2020 when we were working from home, when kids were doing online schools. I have no doubt about that. 1/4 of adults 65 and older feel isolated socially. And here's the thing, you can be around a lot of people and still feel lonely. What makes loneliness tricky is that a lot of times it's not whether you're around people, it's the disconnect between how you want your relationships to be and how they actually are. So the way to kind of think about this, maybe not everybody, but you can be surrounded by your family, like literally in the same room, or you go on a holiday, you have a family gathering, and have all those people around, and you still feel lonely. Well, how can you overcome that? I love this. I absolutely love this. This was an article in the New York Times. You can volunteer. Study of 10,000 volunteers in the United Kingdom. 2/3 felt less isolated after volunteering. And those were young adults, 18 to 34. In Detroit, study of more than 800 people, 5-year study. Volunteering countered the negative effects of stress. Another study looking at widowers, men and women whose husbands or wives died, and these were people 51 and older. if they started volunteering 2 hours a week, it dropped their rates of loneliness. And it dropped their rates of loneliness to where they were equal with married couples. Stunning, stunning, stunning to me. So, and I'll tell you, volunteering, I haven't done it nearly as much as I used to, but you just feel great. You know, I talked recently about how important gratitude is just for overall health and wellness, mental health, preventing burnout. Volunteering is a great way to practice and really savor that feeling of gratitude. So that is something to think about. All right, that is all I've got for you. I hope if you've got free time this week, maybe you can go volunteer. So many great things. I've done highway cleanup. I've done food kitchens. I love the food kitchen. I always thought that was a lot of fun. I volunteered at a retirement home. All sorts of good stuff that you can do. I've worked at a children's hospital before. I was in medicine. There's all kinds of great stuff you can do. If you have any thoughts on anything we talk about, definitely share those. Like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit just real quickly for those of you that watch this either live or down after the fact. Something I want to play around with. Somebody that I know that watches this show every single time has been suggesting this since the beginning of the show. So I'm going to try it out next week and maybe for 3 or 4 weeks. Rather than doing sort of this 8, 10, 12, 15 top health studies in the news and sort of just do an overview of all these different topics. How about I do one topic for an entire show? And I thought, can't hurt to try it. So what I want to try, and I think the 2 topics I'm going to do, one, I don't know which will be Tuesday, which will be Thursday, but I'm going to try that. And I think I want to do the health benefits of coffee, not just coffee's good for you, but all the different ways coffee's potentially good for you, cancers and all sorts of other things, not just you feel better and you're mentally alert, even though that's some of it, but no, real health benefits of coffee and some potential drawbacks. And then the other one I think I'm going to do is on sleep and athletic performance. All the studies that are out there about how sleep plays a role in strength, how sleep plays a role in injuries, how sleep plays a role like this in athletic performance and running performance. So I'm going to try that for a little while. You know, on the title and on the thumbnail for the episode, it'll just have the one topic. And what I'm hoping that does is when you know it's coming, you'll be interested in that, hopefully stimulate a little bit more comments and questions and things like that. We'll see. It'll be an interesting experiment. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to this, or who knows. But I think that's something I want to try for the next few episodes. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure that if you do miss this on a regular basis, or even just occasionally, get the podcast. Subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else. And there's all sorts of really obscure podcast networks that you can find this show as well. Better Than Ever Live. Subscribe to that. Listen to it at the gym. Listen to it on the way to work, on the way home from work. Paying bills, whatever it is, feel free to listen to that. Definitely subscribe, youtube.com/Dr. David Geier. Ring the bell so you're notified when I'm on live. Check out That's Gotta Hurt Live most every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tonight we're discussing Zion Williamson of the Pelicans and his Jones fracture and why that might not be healing well and some dynamics with the team. We're going to discuss Steph Curry and his quad injury. We're going to discuss Antonio Brown. You probably saw him storm off the field, taking off his jersey and throwing it into the stands, and what a mess that was. We're going to talk about what he's saying was the reason he left the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and obviously if I'm talking about it, it's injury related, and anything else that comes up in the world of sports and injuries later today. So check that out tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and good reason to subscribe on YouTube as well. Look forward to seeing you there. I very likely will not be here. I try to do Ask Dr. Geier on Fridays, but I probably will not be able to do it tomorrow, but I promise I will get back into the habit of doing those most every Friday really soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tonight, That's Gotta Hurt Live, and on Tuesday for Better Than Ever Live. Take care.